Hello. So in this video, we're talking about Rosemary Jenkinson's play Planet Belfast, which I'm reading out of Contemporary Irish Plays. So this is a play that is very concerned with the problems of post-Troubles Northern Ireland. Now, for those of you who don't know, very quick background. In Northern Ireland from 1969 up until 1998 was a period known as the Troubles. This was a period of sectarian violence and political violence. Northern Ireland was divided between the Unionists, who were mostly Protestant and wanted Northern Ireland to remain part of the United Kingdom, versus the Republicans, who were primarily Catholic and wanted Northern Ireland to join the Republic of Ireland. This was a guerrilla conflict. It was an urban conflict. Paramilitary pitted against paramilitary, and Republican paramilitaries pitted against the British Army. This was a conflict fought with bombs, a lot of bombs, particularly things like pipe bombs and nail bombs, things like this. There were shootings, assassinations. Knife violence was a big component of this, as well as some more sort of bizarre things like attacks with flamethrowers on occasion. So this was an incredibly destructive conflict. It divided Belfast. It killed a lot of people. It wounded a lot of people. And it really shaped Northern Ireland for about 30 years. One of the big questions that Jenkinson's play asks is, what does Northern Ireland do after the Troubles? And so we have two main characters here. We have Alice and we have Martin, and they're married. Alice is an MLA, which is a member of the Legislative Assembly, I believe. So she is basically a member of the Northern Ireland Parliament. She's a Green Party member, and she is very, very concerned about the environment. And her big push in this play is to oppose a bill that would allow genetically modified potatoes to be grown in Northern Ireland. So that's her whole thing, and she is very, very focused on that. She's also focused on conceiving a baby, and so she has both herself and Martin on these like very restrictive organic diets. They're doing medical tests, etc., etc. So those are her two big things in this play. Martin is a historian. He had written a controversial book in which he essentially argued that the potato famine was a net benefit for Ireland. This was not a popular opinion in Ireland, as you might imagine. But he is of this sort of vein of historians that likes to challenge the consensus by coming up with radical and somewhat, call them tenuous takes on things. But he's in a dry spell. Part of the reason he's in a dry spell, we get the sense, is because he feels emasculated by Alice's success as an MLA. So he goes to work at this archive. It's a trauma center, and theoretically what they do is they catalog the stories of and provide emotional support for victims of the Troubles. But Martin doesn't have anything. He's not a victim of the Troubles per se. Now, this is an interesting tension in his job because his boss, Danny, says at one point, truth recovery. The secret is in the word recovery, yes? So this is an interesting idea. The idea that what they want is essentially a kind of Truth and Reconciliation Commission type thing without the trial aspect, right? So they want people to come in and tell the story of their trauma during the Troubles. Danny has a very compelling story in which his father, as part of a Republican paramilitary punishment squad, had to shoot his mother. And Danny himself became a bomb maker, which was a big job for the IRA, the Irish Republican Army, as well as other Republican paramilitaries. Again, bombs were a big component of this. Pipe bombs and things like this were a major tool in the arsenal of the IRA and the other Republican paramilitaries. So having top skills as a bomb maker make you a very valuable person to the IRA. And Danny says that he had spent time in prison for this. Now, the interesting thing is that this idea of truth exists in uneasy tension with the narrative constructed by this trauma center. Because, again, Martin, he vaguely knew someone who was injured in a bomb blast during the Troubles. That's the full extent of his experience. He doesn't think of himself as a victim. He really doesn't have any personal connection to the Troubles. But there's this exchange between Martin and Danny. So Martin says, but I didn't really have that much contact with the Troubles, did I? Danny says, well, you lived through part of it, didn't you? Fuck's sake, Martin, you're a victim as well, aren't you? Martin says, yes. Danny says, yes. Martin says, well, not really. Danny says, shh, Martin, you must never ever say that around here. Martin says, but it's the truth. Danny says, Martin, what is this a center of? Martin says, trauma. Danny says, implying. Martin says, trauma. Danny says, victims. Victims. Martin says, ah. Danny says, so I ask again, are you a victim? Martin says, I'm a victim. So what Martin sort of comes to realize is that the reason the trauma center continues functioning, and even though it really doesn't see anyone, right? People aren't coming into this trauma center to really tell their stories of their experiences in the Troubles. They aren't doing much real business as far as, healing, the thing that they're supposed to be doing. So what he realizes is that they keep afloat by getting charitable donations, right? They get grant money from the EU, from the United Nations, etc., etc. They get all of this money comes rolling in on the premise that they are filling out grant applications and they are theoretically providing services. Whether or not they actually provide those services or those services are actually necessary is at best a secondary consideration. The money comes in as long as the narrative exists. And so this is what Martin decides he's going to write his next book about, the Troubles industry. That is this idea that Northern Ireland makes money by maintaining the idea of the Troubles, maintaining the idea of victimhood and trauma, whether or not that's actually what's really going on. And Martin makes a very stupid mistake because their old friend from university, Claire, shows up. She's found them through something that seems kind of like Facebook type thing, and she wants to reconnect. However, what it turns out is that Claire is now kind of a scheming bitch. Sorry, but that's where it is. What she wants, basically, is to gain some kind of leverage over Martin and Alice because she is working for a major biotech firm. She's working for a company. I can't remember what the name of it is. Amtrex. So she's working for a company called Amtrex, which is the company that wants the contract to bring genetically modified potatoes to Northern Ireland. The very thing that Alice is working to oppose. So what Claire is trying to do essentially is gain leverage over the couple. The first way she tries to do this is by seducing Martin, which she is almost successful at. They make out, they take their clothes off, but they don't have sex. But then he tells her about his book, in which he is going to expose the Troubles industry. And basically, she says, "Oh, that's great. I'd be really interested in that. Can you send me a chapter?" He doesn't know that she works for Amtrex at this point. But he sends her the chapter of his book, which is going to be very inflammatory. And Claire can then use that as leverage to try and force Alice to give up her position on genetically modified potatoes, allowing Amtrex to win the contract, get a bunch of money, etc., etc. So, the interesting tension of Planet Belfast is between the past and the present, right? Like, Martin is a historian. He looks toward the past. That is where his focus is. Alice is a green politician. She is concerned about the future of the planet, and their temporal focuses pull them in opposite directions. This is, I think, an important problem for contemporary Northern Ireland, right? Is to what extent do the Troubles continue to define the future of Northern Ireland versus the need to also be aware of global problems, right? Because global climate change, the future of the planet, is a planet-wide concern. That's why they call it global climate change. So we have these sort of tensions of how Northern Ireland as a nation is going to define itself. And we do, in the background of this, have still that sectarian tension of the Troubles, because Claire is dealing with, because Alice is dealing with, in the Northern Ireland Parliament, she's dealing with Sinn Féin, which is the political wing of the Republicans, the ones who want Northern Ireland to join the Republic of Ireland. She's also dealing with the Independent Unionists and the DUP, Democratic Unionist Party, who are political wings of the Unionist faction, as the names imply. So she's trying to make deals with both sides of this sectarian conflict, and there is still tension about what the political future of Northern Ireland should be. It's mostly not being carried out with bombs and shootings anymore, but there is still political tension over whether Northern Ireland should rejoin the Republic or should remain with the United Kingdom. But Alice is trying to push beyond those sectarian tensions. She's trying to push beyond that concern with the local issue. And she's trying to get the other MLAs to think globally. And it's a challenge for them because so much of that, the mindset of Northern Ireland ends up being conflict-based, ends up being very local, very tribal, because that was the kind of country that the Troubles built in some ways, where if I didn't know you and know that you were a good Republican/Catholic or a good Unionist/Protestant, I didn't know that I could trust you. And that's a difficult situation to bring people together in, to say, look, this is a problem that faces us all. And that's what Alice is struggling to do. And Martin is, again, working much more on this personal level, and this is where the tension comes in their relationship. He is concerned about his next book. He's concerned about his job, his feelings of emasculation at her political success.